Hey guys, it's the founder of Developers Academy, and today I'm going to show you how you can download images from the internet with a URL that you get maybe from your server, maybe from your REST API response, or maybe from your JSON data source. So here is the complete project that we are going to build in this episode number 67 of our Code Hangout show together. So this is the complete project. You can see that the thumbnails of my Code Hangout apps, it changes because it dynamically downloads the thumbnail images from a URL of the episode. Okay, so that's what we're going to do together. This is the starter project that you can download right down below in the description link. If you go there, you can see that right now when I open the project and I run it, all the images is set to default to the default image that I have in my local file, in my local project. Okay, it doesn't download anything, it doesn't download any project at all or any images at all. So goes right down there in the description link and download the start project and we will get started. Okay, and as always, when you click onto that link, you go to my blog, which is something like this. And you can download the start project by submitting your name and email here. And as always, I will send you my latest iOS course for free as my thanks for checking out the Code Hangout show with me. Okay, so here we go. Let's go into the complete project, starter project, and I will go over a file called network service. This network service only does is from a URL that you gives it will download data from the URL and then turn it into an NS data, which is a foundation object from the iOS framework, right? So I have a to-do here, make this class be able to download images from a URL. So in order to download images from URL in iOS, there are tons of ways to do that. One of the best way is use a group of methods called NS URL session. Okay, so let me do that. The first thing is that we'll need to create a lazy variable. It means that it will lazily create it. It's not created at the time of the initialization of the class, but rather it is created when you create the property itself. So I will have a lazy var configuration. This configuration is of type NSURL session configuration. Okay, with this configuration, you can have a lot of things, like you can download on the background. It means that when you are downloading the maybe a file, an image, or a project or something in your app, then if the user put your app on background or switch the app, your app is not on the foreground, but it can still download the images. Okay, but right now we'll use just the default session configuration. So we use NSURL session configuration dot default session configuration like this, and then I'll have another variable called lazy var session, and it is of type NSURL session. With the NSURL session configuration, here we'll have to pass in the configuration that we just created. Here it is just a default session configuration, allows us to download stuff from a URL. So configuration over here, okay, or you can use self.configuration. The nice thing about this is that we can lazily load it. It means that we can, if you try to have not this lazy, then you cannot do the self.configuration inside a property. Okay, it's just the syntax, it's just the language itself. The other thing is a URL. The URL that we want to download data from. So it is of type NSURL. We want to have an NSURL, not optional, because once this is using, we don't want to use an optional NSURL, right? And then init URL is an NSURL, so that we can create an instance of the network service class, and we'll use self.url equals URL like that. Okay. So next, I want to create a function, and this function is the function that we can use to download the image. The nice thing about this function is that it downloads image, but it will take some time. It will take some time to download the image. It makes sense, right? Like the image, usually it is 1 megabyte or up to 10 megabytes, or sometimes it dozens of megabytes from a URL. So in your app, in your iPhone app, usually when you use the iPhone app, it's always very smooth. It's always responsive. It's always running. If you have an app that doesn't run, that doesn't respond to your touch gesture, then you think that this app crashes. But a lot of time when the user creates an app, they forgot about it. They forgot about the user experience. So they download apps and they download things on the internet, and it stops the flow of the app. User thinks that it is stopping the app crashes, so they stop using the app. Or even worse, they go to the app store and says that this app crashes. Okay, so we don't want to have that. The way that we can do this is using the methods in the NSURL section over here. It allows us to download data, but in a different thread, in a different queue. The reason for that, the nice thing about that is iOS, the phone, it is not created on just one execution line or queue. Okay, it divided into many different queues of execution of your code. One queue is called the main queue. The main queue is responsible for UI code, things like UI table view, things like animation, gesture, all the things that the user is interacting with is executed on the main queue. And all the other things that takes some time to execute, to download images, to download a bunch of new posts, to download a bunch of messages, all of those things, it has to be on a different queue. And that is off the main queue. So the NSURL section is built-in, allows us to do that. But another thing is, so let's do this, okay? Func download image. As we write the code, we will talk more about this. And then we'll have a completion handler. Now the completion handler here is a callback mechanism. This callback mechanism, as I told you, that when we download the image, it takes some time, right? So at the process downloading, when the process is done, we want to have a callback mechanism so that the caller of the method can know that this image has been downloaded. So the process is now, okay? So this completion handler I will use, it is of type NSData, and it returns nil. Returns void. Okay, this is just a it's just a closure in Swift. And then first I will have a request, which is of type NSURL request with the URL of self.url, because we already have the URL. Next, let's have a data task. This data task is of type session.data task with request, and we use the data task with request completion handler. Okay, and we pass in the request and the completion handler here. Press enter, and we have a data, we have a response, and we have an NS error. Okay, we have 3 parameters for the data task. Now inside this is our download, the results that we get from downloading this stuff. Notice is this let data task, it is of the main queue. It is of the main queue. So if we want to do something with UI code, we must do it on the main queue. We must get back to the main queue. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to have, now before we do, we'll have to check if we have an error or not. If error equals to nil, it means that we don't have any error, right? Otherwise, we want to do something like else print we have an error downloading data, then we have string interpolation dot localize description for the error. Okay, that's good. Now we are making sure that there's no error, there's no existing error with this one. But hold on, because we have also a response over here. This response is of type, we can cast it as an NSHTTP URL response. This response is the response from your server. Okay, now with a URL, you have to communicate with a server, right? And when the server that we want to maybe download something from the server, then the server may return us a bunch of data along with an HTTP response. And if we do got the response correctly, the data correctly, what we want to have, then we got a code for that response is 200. If there's some error with the server, maybe like the URL that you provide the server doesn't exist, maybe the server is down, maybe the server has some errors, then that HTTP response is really, really important. So here, I will check if let HTTP response equals response as an NS HTTP URL response. Okay, and then I will switch on this HTTP response.code. Status code. This code, it can be 200. You can go to Wikipedia and check for HTTP URL response, okay, or HTTP response, and you have a bunch of code for that. But right now on this demo, let's just say we got a case of response code is 200. It means that we download the data successfully. So if let data equals data, so we got the data, and then we call the completion block. Okay, now we can call the completion block. Otherwise, on the default case of the switch, I will just break it out of, how about I will print the HTTP response dot status code like that, and we'll have the code for the response. Okay, so let's build the project. Okay, so we have a data out here. Let me see what's. Oh, all right, I see. Now we have an error over here. It says that completion missing argument for parameter number 1 in the call. The reason for that is the parameter of this completion handler of the closure over here, we have to pass in a data. So I will pass in the data over here so that we have the data. Okay. Now we got this class is up and running. But one more thing we have to handle is this data task. This data task by itself, when we create it, it doesn't mean that we will download the images immediately. The silly thing is that you have to go outside of the scope here, and you says data task dot resume like this. So we have the data task dot resume. Then we have everything is good to go. Okay. Now after we got this, let's go back into our UI table view cell, and then we'll download the image. Okay. Now I can have let's thumbnail URL is what is that? Episode dot thumbnail URL. Then we got an optional of NS URL. So I will over here I will use if let syntax. So we do have the thumbnail. Okay. Then I will create an instance of the network service equals network service like this with the URL of thumbnail URL. Okay. And we'll build and run. Let's see if it works. Okay, it works. Now we want to download the images. Network service dot, let's hide this guy. Network service dot download image, and we got a completion return. So let's press enter and the data over here. Now we got a bunch of data, but notice is if you want to assign this into the image, then we can use let image equals UI image with the data of the data that we get from the server. The last thing is we want to assign the image that we download here, and we convert that from NS data into this IB outlet called the thumbnail image view. But this thumbnail image view, it is an IB outlet, right? It is a UI image view, and it is UI code. So if we want to do UI code, we must return back to the main queue. So we have to use something called Grand Central Dispatch. Dispatch async dispatch get main queue and then a block, press enter, and then inside this I will use self.thumbnail image view dot image to be the image. Okay, so it's good to go. Now let's view and run the project. Here we go, and you will see that we have a bunch of images. It's downloading the image and everything works as nicely as that. Okay, so I hope that you enjoyed this episode of my live code hangout show number 67. As always, if you go back into your email right now, if you submit your name and email to download the starter project and all the resources for this episode, then I already sent you another email to download my new iOS course. I believe at this time of the screencast, the course is how to build a photo browser app using UI Tail View. You will learn everything you need to know about Tail View. So let's go into your email, get the iOS course, and enjoy it. I hope that you enjoyed this, and as always, go out there every single day of your life, learn new things, craft your ideas, and contribute to the world.